discovered in the nursing home. My grandson points to a woman who transformed my life forever. Geraldine peered through the frosted window of the nursing home, watching the vibrant world outside continue to spin without her. Laughter and energy filled the crisp air. It all felt light years away, as if she were still trapped in that suffocating room of echoes and gray walls. Once she had filled those spaces with color and vibrancy. Once she was an art teacher, a guiding light, drawing out dreams from young minds. Now, at 72, she felt invisible, like an old painting fading into the backdrop. On this particular day, as her 10-year-old grandson Noah climbed onto the chair beside her, her heart swelled momentarily, chasing the shadows away. His youthful exuberance contrasted harshly with her own stagnant feelings. "Look, Grandma!" he exclaimed, pointing excitedly to a frail yet spirited woman across the room. "That lady paints too." Geraldine's heart sank as she forced her gaze toward Alice. A former art teacher with a storied past, Alice seemed to breathe life into the dull surroundings. God, that was all she wanted, to experience that again. But self-doubt washed over her, drowning out Noah's eager encouragement. What if Alice didn't want to talk to an old, forgotten teacher? What if the spark of their shared passion merely ignited a flame of unwanted memories? "Go say hi," Noah insisted, his enthusiasm unwavering. Geraldine hesitated, gripping the edge of her chair as an internal storm raged. What did she have to offer Alice? Nothing but a lifetime of failures and underwhelming attempts to reclaim her vibrant self. Each moment spent in silence grew heavier, filling her with dread. Each passing second turned her thoughts into a cliff she teetered on, questioning her worth and the validity of her dreams. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As she gathered the shaky remnants of her resolve, curiosity flickered, igniting an ember of longing she thought extinguished. What if they could connect through their art? What if she could push through the barriers of self-doubt, holding her hostage? Geraldine rose, her legs trembling, wandering toward Alice with hesitant steps, battling against the tidal wave of insecurities nipping at her heels. Yet the closer she got, the more she faced the relentless skepticism that plagued her. What would the local art community think of a woman her age daring to paint again? Chatter echoed in her mind, whispering doubts that merged with insecurities, old rumors they'd hurled like stones at her once vibrant spirit. Was she worthy of standing shoulder to shoulder with artists who'd never been lost? Just then, as she stood at the precipice, conflicted thoughts clashed within her. Each brushstroke she longed to make on a canvas represented a battle against dismissal, a confrontation with her past. Could she reclaim her passion in a world that often dismissed the elderly? The echoes of her doubts whispered in her ears, growing louder just as Alice turned her eyes towards Geraldine. In that moment, Geraldine faced an uncertain crossroads filled with swirling emotions and unexpected bonds. Anxiety gripped her heart as the final pieces fell into place. Would she dare to challenge the narrative of a forgotten life, longing to reclaim the artist she once believed herself to be? The room swelled with possibility, yet an overwhelming pressure hung thick in the air. She took a breath, tension coursing through her veins, trapped between despair and hope, a brink of revelation that begged for resolution. Would she embrace the artist within, or retreat to the shadows from which she came? The audience, too, seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what she would do next. As Alice's gaze locked with Geraldine's, a flicker of recognition passed between them, bridging years of silence and unexpressed dreams. Geraldine stood frozen, her heart a rhythmic drumbeat echoing her uncertainties. She felt exposed, as though Alice could see every fragment of her crushed ambitions, laid bare before her. It was in that shared silence that the weight of Geraldine's hesitations began to shift. "Hello," Alice greeted softly, her voice a gentle breeze cutting through the tense atmosphere. Geraldine's breath caught. Warmth emanated from Alice, enveloping her like a comforting embrace. No judgment, no reproach, a simple recognition that they both belonged in a world of creativity. "Hi, I'm Geraldine," she managed to reply, her voice barely above a whisper. But a small part of her felt empowered. Perhaps she wasn't invisible after all. "What do you paint?" Alice asked, her eyes sparkling with genuine interest, as if she could sense the quivering passion beneath Geraldine's surface. Suddenly, the looming specter of self-doubt started to wane, replaced by an inquisitive light that ignited a tiny flame of hope. "Flowers, landscapes," Geraldine stammered, recalling the vibrant canvases she'd once brought to life with color. The images flickered in her mind, bright and full of promise, pushing back against the years of shadows that had obscured them. "But it's been so long since well, I've hardly picked up a brush." "Then it's time, isn't it?" Alice replied, her voice steady but encouraging. "Art always finds a way back." The moment resonated deep within Geraldine, piercing through her veils of self-doubt. Could it really be that simple? She had clung to her past failures for so long, like an old coat that no longer fit, yet felt too familiar to discard. The prospect of creating art again conjured a whirlwind of emotions. Fear intertwined with longing, hesitation kissed by determination. Suddenly a new thought pierced the noise in her head. What if her struggle was not a sign of defeat, but rather a testament to resilience? Geraldine looked at Alice and saw something more than a reflection of what she feared to lose. She saw potential, and, oddly enough, companionship. These were the winds of change she had yearned for, blowing firmly yet gently towards a new beginning. "Would you like to paint with me sometime?" Alice asked, as if reading the tumult of thoughts swirling in Geraldine's mind. The suggestion startled her, a rush of warmth pooling in her chest. It was a request, not a demand, an invitation to embrace her identity, to step outside the shadows that had encased her for so long. "Really? You'd want to?" Geraldine questioned, her disbelief edging into her voice. The disbelief was a reflection of a deeper truth, the longing she had buried inside her, buried under years of inhibition and regret. "Of course. Art should be shared, not hidden away. Let's revive the passion together," Alice encouraged, and in that instant, something shifted within Geraldine. A flicker of self-acceptance ignited. She realized that her artistic journey need not be solitary, nor did it have to carry the burden of judgment. Geraldine took a deep breath, weighing her options. Would she hold on to her vanishing past, or step forward into uncertain yet welcoming territory? To paint again with Alice would mean confronting fears and discovering fragments of herself she thought had been lost forever. As she contemplated, a single question pierced her determination. How long would she allow her insecurities to dictate her life? The shadows began to shift, leaving behind uncertainty infused with shimmering possibility. But before she could answer it, a sudden commotion erupted on the other side of the room, breaking the moment entirely. What was that? Geraldine's attention snapped away from Alice, toward the disturbance, heart pounding against the quiet eddies of hope she had begun to weave. Her past and future tumbled together into an exhilarating mess, but the path forward felt clearer than before. Yet just as clarity emerged, an unsettling feeling knotted in her stomach. What new challenge awaited her now, as she stepped onto the precipice of artistic rebirth? The air hung thick with unworked potential. And as Geraldine turned back towards Alice, she knew she stood at a defining moment in her life. Would she seize this opportunity, or allow more disruptions to shake her budding courage? The culmination of their futures, painted anew, swirled just beyond the chaos. Geraldine's heart raced as she turned toward the noise, a sudden reminder of how quickly plans could spiral into chaos. A group of people had gathered near the entrance, voices rising in concern as they assessed the source of the disturbance. For one brief moment, her resolve to embrace her budding artistic journey wavered, overshadowed by anxiety and uncertainty. "Let's see what's going on," Alice suggested, her tone companionable despite the sudden shift in energy. But as they approached the scene, Geraldine could feel the weight of her previous hesitations creeping back. The crowd parted slightly, revealing an elderly man who had fallen, his frail body awkwardly sprawled on the floor. The sight jolted Geraldine, snaps of disbelief tugging at her heart. She felt an instinctive need to help, yet felt paralyzed, rooted in her everyday fear. Assisting someone in such a vulnerable state mirrored her own feelings of exposure and fragility. "Do you think we should help?" Alice glanced at her, gauging Geraldine's retreating confidence. Igniting the courage that had begun to rekindle, Geraldine nodded, surprised by the fierceness of her own desire to act. They rushed forward, their footsteps echoing in the tense atmosphere. As others joined in to assist the man, Geraldine was reminded of a similar incident from her past, when she found herself utterly incapable of stepping forward to rescue her dreams. The stark memories hung like shadows behind her, each one speaking to the ghosts of her ambition that she had so desperately tried to forget. After the man was helped back to his feet, the crowd slowly dispersed, and that spiraling anxiety began to ebb, replaced by a heightened sense of clarity. Geraldine turned back to Alice, a mix of gratitude and honesty reflected in her gaze. "Thank you for pulling me out of my thoughts, or perhaps for grounding me," she said, the words flowing easily now. "Of course. We can't let ourselves get lost in fear," Alice replied, her voice steady, almost a rallying cry to keep pressing forward. In that moment, something decluttered in Geraldine's mind. Alice's words, always echoing with purpose, had unearthed a previously hidden resolve buried beneath years of self-doubt. Art needed to be shared, just like courage. She began to understand that each brushstroke would hold not merely color, but also stories of resilience. Stories to share with others. "I want to paint again," she declared, the determination in her tone solidifying like the thick layers of oil paint on her own canvases. "Not just because I miss it, but because I have something to express." Alice's smile widened, reigniting Geraldine's confidence tenfold. "Then let's start small. A little studio session together will be perfect," she said. But the moment was about more than just art. It was an acknowledgement of the personal blocks that Geraldine had faced. However, a new question lingered in her mind. If she stepped forward to embrace this journey, what other fears would emerge? The chaotic energy from earlier still lingered within her. How could she reconcile the fear of failure with the thrill of creation? The promise of the brush somehow felt like a double-edged sword. As they walked back through the gallery, Geraldine could feel the pull of old doubts attempting to reassert themselves. But with Alice by her side, each doubt took on a lesser weight. Perhaps this was what she'd neglected all these years. The conviction that she didn't need to navigate this new path alone. And yet, as they stood before a giant landscape painting that illuminated the wall, an alarming thought rippled through her. Would sharing her art with others expose her vulnerabilities anew? Was she truly ready to face the scrutiny that came with unveiling her inner core? The air thickened with anticipation, and as she glanced toward Alice, Geraldine felt a surprising sense of agency blossom within her. Perhaps stepping from the shadows meant accepting not just the brilliance of creativity, but the inevitable discomfort of unfiltered expression. She looked back at that sprawling painting, now more than just art. It was a reflection of the journey ahead. Colorful, daunting, and stitched together with uncertainty. Would she truly confront what lay within her? That question hovered, teasing the edges of her thoughts, as she understood she stood at yet another crossroads. The moment of truth surged forward again. What would her art reveal? And what parts of herself would she need to lay bare to find fulfillment? Geraldine's heart thudded in her chest as the enormity of her revelation settled in. Would she truly share her artistic voice? Or would she falter and retreat into the familiar shadows of doubt? That fear gnawed at her, but as she stood before the painting, a flicker of defiance ignited within. She was not ready to allow fear to dictate her life any longer. I can't just jump into the deep end without testing the waters first, she mused aloud, veering her focus away from the spectacle that surrounded her. I need to start with something small, something just for me. Alice nodded, her expression reassuring yet undeniably encouraging, as if she sensed the internal push and pull of Geraldine's thoughts. That's smart, she said, voice imbued with a warmth that felt buoying. Why don't we set up your first canvas this weekend? A small celebration of the rediscovery of your art. The idea sent ripples of excitement coursing through her. This was the opportunity she craved. It would also allow her to confront the fears that veiled her passion for so long. But what if it turns out awful? What if the paint doesn't spread the way I envisioned? What if, after all this time, I'm not the artist I wanted to be? The worries clattered around her mind with unsettling volume. Those fears are valid, Alice acknowledged, the openness in her tone a stark reminder of the sanctuary her friend provided. But remember, every artist has had moments of doubt. The magic lies in creation, not perfection. Geraldine chewed on her lip, weighing Alice's words. It was easier to fantasize about rainbows spilling onto her canvas, vibrant and dappled, than to face the likelihood of muddy colors and mistimed strokes. Yet, wasn't the challenge, the uncertainty, part of the thrill? What if I use it as therapy? As a way to explore those feelings? She pondered, realizing that unlike a stage performance, there would be no audience. Exactly. Just you and your creativity, Alice replied, her smile radiant as if they were already there, in the studio, paintbrushes in hand. You'll be exploring yourself, your fears, and your emotions. It will be cathartic, an opportunity for growth. But beneath the exhilaration resided a flicker of anxiety, a growing realization that diving into such an endeavor required facing parts of herself she had long left untouched. Could she allow herself to confront childhood memories of art classes, where her hand trembled, not from excitement but from pure self-doubt? In the stirring silence punctuated by lively conversations around them, Geraldine felt an uncomfortable truth surfacing. What if the act of creating art became a mirror reflecting all her insecurities? Was she brave enough to face those shadows? Let's not forget, Alice continued, interrupting her turbulent thoughts. Art is a dialogue. It's you talking to the world in a way words sometimes can't convey. Think of it as a journey. You're not just reaching for a finished piece, but exploring the layers that bridge who you were with who you want to become. A remarkable shift took place within Geraldine, the weight of uncertainty slowly morphing into determination. She could see herself standing before her easel, brush in hand, traversing the landscape of her emotions. Maybe she'd stumble along the way, but Alice's unwavering faith in her stirred a resilient courage she wasn't aware existed. I'll do it, Geraldine declared, the conviction filling her as she imagined the soothing flow of paint against canvas. Beneath the surface tension, her resolve began to entwine with her artistic aspirations. I can craft something raw and authentic, my truth unapologetically on display. As they turned to leave, a flurry of thoughts enveloped her. She felt the weight of her journey bearing down more heavily than before. But now it also felt like a gift, an invitation to embrace the uncomfortable. Yet, even as her resolve solidified, doubt nestled back into her mind, a parasite ready to feed off her success. What if the artistic journey could illuminate not only her strengths, but also her deepest insecurities? The path forward was riddled with questions, and as Geraldine stepped away from the gallery, she realized she was merely standing at the brink of her exploration. A precipice ready to leap into an unknown world of creation, where every brushstroke could wield the power of revelation. What awaited her when she committed to the canvas? Would art become a liberation? Or would it resurrect fears more profound than she ever anticipated? The moment of truth loomed ever closer, demanding that she either step forward into the light or remain gripped by the shadows lurking behind her dreams. Geraldine woke up early the next morning, sunlight streaming through her window. But the warmth felt more like a spotlight illuminating her tangled thoughts. Today marked the day she would start anew, armed only with a canvas, paint, and a plethora of emotions. Yet, the anticipation in her chest warred with the heaviness of doubt. What if I go blank? What if my creativity feels like ash, lingering in the air? She brushed away those thoughts, attempting to remember Alice's words. This was about exploration, a dialogue with herself through colors and shapes. Setting a simple goal for the day, she grabbed her sketchbook. She resolved to capture what had been swirling in her mind, a swirling nebula of ideas, fears, and hopes. With each stroke of the pencil, she felt herself trembling, balancing on the edge of courage and fear. As the hours drifted by, she found herself reaching for colors, letting them collide on the page. The initial strokes were tentative, shaking with every sweep. But then something clicked. The paint glided effortless as her emotions poured out, a jumbled mix of anxiety interwoven with longing, frustration, but also liberation. Maybe it doesn't need to be perfect, she whispered to herself, realizing that this journey was to seek clarity amidst chaos. With each layer of paint, she felt like she was clawing through years of suppression. The colors mixed and skidded, battling against one another, mirroring the internal conflicts battling her spirit. But as she painted, shadows crept into her mind, whispers of the past cutting through her focus. Memories of critiques, of fingers pointing at failures, struck harsh notes against the harmony she sought, threatening to drown her in self-doubt. "You're not good enough. You should stop trying," they hissed, each word a droplet of poison. "Enough," she said, her voice stronger, fiercer. "This is my canvas, my rules." Flipping through a previous sketch, a half-finished piece mocked her, taunting her inability to follow through. It was then that an idea sparked, a way to confront the part of her that longed for validation, yet fled from the light. With trembling hands, she plotted her next move. Geraldine decided to intentionally paint over that sketch, covering it with vibrant hues, reclaiming her ownership over it. Splashing bright yellow over the drab grays felt cathartic, liberating in ways she never expected. This act of defiance evolved into a dance of brush and paint, each stroke liberating her ancient constructs of self-worth, unraveling layers of shame until she felt her spirit rise anew. As dusk approached, shades of orange and pink filled the sky, reminding her of new beginnings. Stepping back from her canvas, her heart raced. The piece before her resembled a chaotic ensemble of color and form, yet it whispered truths that transcended her initial vision. It captured vulnerability, a richness she had never allowed herself to express previously. As she examined her work, the satisfaction washed over her. It was raw and imperfect, yet it thrummed with the energy of her creativity, a testament of her journey toward self-acceptance. But among the sparks of happiness, a nagging fear flickered. What would others think? Would someone recognize the essence she poured into it? There was a part of her eager for validation, Yet another part scared that exposure would shatter this fragile moment of authenticity. As Geraldine placed her palette down, the weight of her decision settled. She had dismantled walls within herself, but now stood at another threshold. Would she have the courage to present this work to anyone else? The specter of judgment loomed larger than before. In the stillness that followed, a new reality dawned on her. True growth required vulnerability. Taking a deep breath, she felt the pulsing fear and undeniable excitement converging into a complex tapestry of emotions. What awaited her when she invited others into her world of colors? Was she prepared to confront not just her insecurities, but to embrace the possibility of connection through sharing her truth? With determination edging against trepidation, Geraldine harbored a flickering hope that perhaps vulnerability could be her greatest canvas yet. The stage was set for what could be her most profound breakthrough, an invitation to the world that dared her to step forward. Would she embrace this gift of connection? Or would fear silence her voice once more? Geraldine stood at the edge of her old wooden easel, the canvas before her pulsating with potential and enough color to drown her uncertainties. She had resisted the urge to cover it up since her last mercurial bout of painting, yet staring at it now felt like staring into a mirror reflecting both unease and hope. The pieces of herself unveiled in vivid layers confronted her as much as the question of how others would perceive her work. She had spent the previous night oscillating between excitement and anxiety. Each color she had chosen spoke to a fear, a desire, a memory, making every brushstroke a deeper revelation of her fractured self. The swirling chaos she had captured dwindled her need for validation, but it was still tethered tightly to the hesitation that gripped her heart. As the day unfolded, rather than picking up her brush, she again reached for her sketchbook. This time, her goal morphed into a dialogue, an exploration not just of colors, but of emotions she dared to mask for so long. The blank pages felt ominous, yet inviting, like an empty stage awaiting a performance she longed to give. With each pencil stroke that filled the void, clarity began to seep through her intricate fears. She began sketching a series of self-portraits, capturing the very essence of her fragmented psyche. One moment she depicted herself enveloped in color, vibrant and free. Another moment she illustrated herself caged, constricted by doubt. A battle of perspectives flowed onto the paper, forcing her to confront each side with equal ferocity. Feeling emboldened, she outlined a scene that pitted her against her most crippling fears, each stroke of pencil laying bare the oppressive weight of disapproval she'd often felt. Upon reflection, she began to grasp the reality of her journey. Each critique forming the barricades in her mind became no more than an echo of past echoes. They were specters of her past, nothing more. Geraldine needed to realize that she was the artist here, crafting her own story. Yet as she completed one particularly raw piece, the gaunt figure staring back from the page had an unnerving familiarity. It was only then that she experienced a flash of revelation. There was strength in vulnerability. A crystallizing moment of resolve washed over her. She could own her narrative. Her art was the weapon and shield she could use to combat the disbelief that had held her captive for years. She suddenly felt the urge to share, to connect, rather than hide. What if her feared exposure could turn into empowerment? Vulnerability might serve as a bridge to authenticity, not allowed eluded, but embraced and exposed. Alongside the thoughts of sharing her work came the simple yet powerful idea of hosting a small gathering, yet doubt seeped back in as she considered it. What would it take to invite people into her world? The lingering question became an anchor as the shadow of judgment eclipsed her newfound courage. Should she risk letting others peer into her colored chaos, and perhaps dismantle the bravery she felt at that moment? The notion of gathering those she trusted, friends, perhaps colleagues from the art community, intensified her anxiety even further. What if they saw her pieces as childish or flawed? Was she prepared to expose her heart when so many had deemed it undeserving of love? Yet, with tentative resolve, she wrote an invitation. Even as the lines formed across the page, she wrestled with the contradictions brewing inside. Who was to judge the authenticity of her experience? It was hers to tell, and the risk of connection loomed like an uncharted journey ahead. As she sealed the envelope, uncertainty coiled within her like a snake coiled around its prey. The act of sending it off was both exhilarating and terrifying. The fear of anticipation settled over her like a thick fog. Would anyone show? Would they resonate with what she'd created? Geraldine took a deep breath, standing at the precipice of a new path. Would she allow herself to be seen? To invite both critique and appreciation into her life? The stirring in her chest mirrored the beat of potential connections waiting just beyond her door. The ink dried, and as she stepped outside, the air felt electric. She was ready to run the gauntlet of vulnerability, armed with paint and declaration of her truth. But before she could venture further, a voice echoed in her mind. What if they don't see you at all? And as that question hung uncomfortably in the air, the next step awaited her. The reckoning of whether vulnerability would indeed become her greatest strength. As the days crept toward her self-organized gathering, Geraldine found herself engulfed in an insatiable whirlpool of anticipation, mixed with dread. The walls of her studio became remnants of her chaotic thoughts. Each stroke on canvas during those moments felt almost prophetically crafted to expose the very essence of her journey. She obsessively scrutinized her sketches, questioning the integrity of her own creations. Were they art, or merely reflections of a desperate artist seeking approval? That haunting question built a tapestry of apprehension that sat heavily in her gut. One evening, while flipping through a stack of her old art books in search of inspiration, she stumbled upon a passage about a forgotten artist who once faced scorn but emerged immensely powerful. The words leapt off the page, igniting a dying ember of confidence within her. She had never considered art as a vehicle for change, not just for herself, but for others as well. The idea that her vulnerability could resonate with someone else sparked a powerful realization. There were no misplaced brushstrokes in honesty. As she prepared for the gathering, she diverted her focus from merely showcasing her work to fostering genuine conversations about vulnerability. What if her aim shifted from seeking validation to offering an experience? A raw encounter of humanity through art. With this newfound purpose, she dedicated hours to crafting not just art, but a narrative that would anchor each piece. They would become chapters in her story, inviting her guests into the labyrinth of her emotions. In the days leading up to the event, she began speaking to those she had invited, sharing snippets of her creative process. Each conversation became an opportunity to reflect on her vulnerability and to foster a connection beyond the artwork itself. Just as she peeled back layers of herself to paint, she encouraged openness in others, occasionally even asking to hear their journeys. It was a slow unraveling of a web she had constructed in her mind. A web woven tightly with threads of fear and uncertainty. Yet her shadowy doubts persisted. Could she withstand the weight of judgment if it fell upon her shoulders again? To counter this auditory tick of self-doubt, she plotted a mental exercise to visualize ahead. What if the reactions were met with understanding and connection? This was a gripping push and pull, yet dispelling the shadow of failure became part of her exploration. The more she focused on cultivating a space of mutual vulnerability, the thinner doubt's grip felt. The night drew near, and anticipation transitioned into an anxious energy as she rearranged furniture to facilitate intimacy. Tables once cluttered with paintbrushes were now cleared for interaction. Each space designed meticulously to draw her guests closer to one another. The thought made her heart race, merging excitement and trepidation into a single pulse. With the arrival of each guest, her resolve solidified. As they entered, she welcomed them with warmth, sharing laughter and snippets of her journey, decreasing the ominous weight of judgment she so feared. The atmosphere buzzed, and suddenly, in that sacred space, she felt a metamorphosis occurring. Their engagement with her story felt layered in camaraderie. They weren't here merely to esteem her art, but to witness each other's vulnerability. Finally, when the time came to share her work, Geraldine felt an unusual sense of calm wash over her. The burgeoning connection she had formed with her guests helped dissipate her anxieties. She introduced each artwork not just with the technicalities of creation, but with the sincere stories entwined within them. As she witnessed their reactions shift from confusion to empathy, something fundamental clicked. Art was indeed a conduit for understanding. For all, that evening unfolded as she'd hoped, yet as gratitude washed over her, a familiar specter of doubt lingered. Had they truly seen her? Did her vulnerability shine through, or had she merely masked herself in artistry? The duality of liberation and fear tangled in her mind once more, setting the stage for the next convocation of emotions. As she reflected on the night, staring at the remnants of colorful chaos around her, a thought crystallized with piercing clarity. What if this was only the beginning? The idea of authenticity might lead her on an exploration far deeper than she had ever anticipated. Perhaps it was time to dig even further. The lighting became harsh, revealing hidden corners of her studio, and with sudden intensity, the question struck her. What if she peeled back not just her artistic facade, but the layers of societal expectations too? Would she dare to confront the voices demanding conformity, even among her own circles? As hope and anxiety swirled within her, she realized a decisive confrontation loomed on the horizon. It was time to challenge not just her perceptions, but the world surrounding art itself. The stillness of the studio enveloped Geraldine as she lingered in the wake of her gathering. She glanced at her paintings, their vibrant hues like echoes of the laughter and conversations that had filled the space only hours ago. Yet, a tremor of uncertainty buzzed beneath her skin. Had she truly communicated the depth of her soul? Or were they mere beautiful objects viewed through the lens of polite curiosity? In that moment, introspection became her new paintbrush. She sank into the nearest chair, staring at the canvas that depicted her most vulnerable emotions. It had been a tumultuous process, capturing the anguish and joy, the confusion and clarity that swirled within her. Could this piece convey not just her individual struggle, but a universal truth? As she remained caught between hope and doubt, a thought ignited something within her. The urge to delve even further, to explore the raw truths both in herself and the world as she knew it. Her next step seemed clear, yet daunting. The idea clawed at her mind. Shedding her artistic facade was not just about vulnerability in art. It was about confronting the very expectations that the art world had imposed on her. What if she painted without the confines of conventional beauty? What if, instead, she poured out the truths she had long buried beneath a veneer of aestheticism? The thought sent a jolt of thrill through her, mingled with panic. Determined, she took a deep breath and reached for her sketchbook. Page by page, she drafted ideas for a new series. Pieces that pushed the envelope of societal norms, artworks that would dare to challenge the notions of beauty and perfection that often plagued her thoughts. The act of creating had always been therapeutic, but now it became a rebellion against not just herself, but against the very constructs that had dictated her artistic journey thus far. Yet this undertaking was not without its shadows. As she scribbled, an insistent voice piped up, warning her of potential backlash. What if her work was criticized? What if her audience found her exploration to be distasteful or troubling? The very thought froze her hand for a moment. Would discomfort betray her desire for authenticity? Confronting societal expectations also meant grappling with the inevitable fear of rejection. As she wrestled with these thoughts, An unexpected clarity washed over her. This wasn't merely about how her art would be received, but about creating a dialogue. An authentic one that demanded she be unapologetically herself. If she faced backlash, that was part of the journey. It meant she was touching on something real and perhaps even transformative. She flipped her sketchbook closed, a decision crystallizing in her mind. It was time to venture out of her familiar bubble and confront others who might have grappled with similar issues. She would carry her artistic narrative into spaces that welcomed discussions surrounding vulnerability and raw honesty. Art shows, local meetups, and community discussions. Yet, before she embarked on this new journey, she felt compelled to revisit her earlier works. Each piece had served as a gateway into her experiences. She would invite trust into her narrative. Perhaps it was time to host an informal gathering of artists and critics alike, not to showcase her work, but to explore their perceptions, to unearth the unsaid beliefs surrounding artistic expression. What lay beneath the surface of their creations? Were their works free from the burden of expectation? With that thought ignited, she felt excitement blend seamlessly with trepidation. She was stepping onto a path fraught with unknowns, but rich with the promise of transformation. As she prepared for her next exploration, anticipation pedaled between fear and hope. Each brushstroke she planned was a chance to bridge her inner chaos with the outer world. As morning light filtered through her studio, illuminating the canvas of her future, a singular realization swept over her. This pursuit of authenticity could very well demand the ultimate confrontation, not just with the world, but with herself. Would she dare to accept that challenge, to become the artist she was always meant to be? And as she closed her eyes, the next question emerged with clarity. How far was she willing to go in this exploration? The early morning light bathed Geraldine's studio in a soft glow, but the warmth did little to quell the storm brewing inside her. There she sat, her mind a whirl of anticipation and anxiety, the walls closing in as the weight of her decision pressed heavily upon her. Hosting an informal gathering felt monumental, the kind of leap artists usually took in their youth, buoyed by enthusiasm and reckless abandon. Yet now, she battled the ghosts of her past, her once zealous spirit now cloaked in self-doubt. The prospect of facing fellow artists and critics, exposing her raw intentions, made her stomach twist. Would they deride her new vision as superficial? Would they cast her aside for stepping out of line? With a grip on her sketchbook, she jotted down ideas for the invitation. The phrasing morphed repeatedly in her mind, reflecting her internal conflict. Should she frame it as a safe space for critique? An exploration of artistic vulnerability? Each iteration revealed a deeper layer of her fears and desires, illuminating the core of her artistic plea. Then came the first thrust of resolve. She began drafting a personal manifesto of sorts, outlining her vision for the gathering. It would be a platform not just for sharing art, but an open dialogue about the burdens of conformity they all faced. Each word angled toward the truth she long yearned to articulate. Artistic expression should be liberated from the restraints of societal expectation. As her thoughts crystallized into ink on paper, her incremental hesitations morphed into the kind of conviction that demanded action. But just as strength defined her pen strokes, another concern slithered through her mind. What if she was misunderstood? Misinterpretation felt frighteningly possible. Still, a counter-argument arose. Wasn't it the discomfort of misunderstanding that could drive authentic conversations? Each moment of vulnerability offered a chance for connection. She knew then she had to forge ahead. Days faded quickly as she organized the event, beset by waves of self-doubt peppering her excitement. Still, in the pursuit of authenticity, her intention solidified. She would confront the expectations that had stifled her creativity for so long. Perhaps the gathering would unearth hidden truths, both among her guests and within herself. And then came the night of the gathering. Her studio transformed. Warm lights twinkled, illuminating her art in a new way, an invitation to those brave enough to engage with it. Geraldine stood amidst the hastily arranged chairs and wine glasses, a knot of anxiety residing in her chest. With each arrival, she fought the growing fear of judgment. As she greeted the first few guests, their expressions varied. Curiosity mingled with apprehension. They were artists, critics, and friends, all entangled in the same pursuit of meaning and acceptance. The initial exchange seemed fragile, each word a tentative step across a tightrope. But soon, she noticed a shift. Conversations began to burgeon around her, a vibrant tapestry of opinions and insights unfurling. She felt herself softening. They spoke candidly about their own work and the suffocating weight of societal norms. In that moment, Geraldine understood. This gathering was not merely about her shedding fears. It was an awakening for them all. Yet lurking beneath the revelations was the brimming challenge she had avoided all evening. Her own artwork. The time had come for her to unveil the series she had drafted. Pieces that demanded vulnerability and defied predictability. Could she truly present her unfiltered vision to those she deemed judges of her worth? Would they grasp the essence behind her rebellion? As she hesitated, a silence filled the room, heavy with unspoken anticipation. She felt the weight of their gazes urging her to shift from her comfort zone. Closing her eyes for a fleeting moment, Geraldine took a breath, steadied by the belief that authenticity was worth the risk. The time had come to face her fears, but would she find the strength to share her unrestrained creations? Would her desire for authenticity echo in the hearts of those witnessing her intimate struggle? With a sudden rush of determination, she stepped forward, ready to lay bare her soul. And as the first canvas emerged from behind the curtain, the true revelation of that night loomed. Would the courage she found in vulnerability spark a deeper transformation? Not just for herself, but for everyone in the room? Geraldine stood before her canvas, a manifestation of all she had experienced, and she felt an exhilarating surge of trepidation and hope. She'd spent countless hours pouring layers of emotion into her work, each brushstroke a step closer to reclaiming her identity as an artist. Now, facing the gathering, she sensed the palpable weight of her audience's collective anticipation hanging thick in the air. As she unveiled the first piece, the glow from the studio lights danced across the vibrant colors, chaotic, yet carefully curated. The expressions on her guests' faces transformed from uncertainty to curiosity. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as they began to engage with her work, their fascination fanning the embers of her self-assurance. "Tell us about this piece, Geraldine," someone finally urged, breaking the tension. "I painted this during a time when I felt confined, both artistically and personally." The colors symbolized the tumult of emotions, a mixture of fears and hopes interwoven into my reality, she shared, her voice steadying with each word. It was no longer just about presenting art. It was about sharing her story, her vulnerabilities, and, alongside that, an invitation into the honest complexities of human experience. Feeling a flicker of empowerment, she moved to the next canvas, allowing herself to delve deeper into the narratives behind each piece. With each unveiling, she noticed how the conversations blossomed, inviting her into discussions about the fears and limitations that stifled their creativity too. No longer isolated, she found camaraderie in shared struggles, every story weaving a tighter bond of authenticity among them. As she revealed the final artwork, a bold piece that directly confronted societal expectations, she took a deep breath. This one truly represents defiance against the fear of judgment. I painted it with raw intensity, channeling all the times I felt silenced or unworthy. The room fell quiet, absorbing her message. To her surprise, applause erupted around her. The appreciation from her guests felt like tangible validation, a recognition that transcended the superficial applause often given to art deemed pretty. They saw her, really saw her. Each stroke, each moment of vulnerability, echoed loudly across that intimate gathering. As discussions flowed seamlessly through the evening, Geraldine felt herself transformed. How curious it was that allowing her authentic self to emerge birthed authentic connections, illuminating the very shadows she once believed would swallow her whole. This revelation sparked something fierce within her. It was time to challenge those societal expectations further, not just as a means of critique, but to create a movement driven by unvarnished honesty in art. "Let's create a space for all of us," she proposed, invigorated by their responses. "An exhibit where we can share our journeys not just through art, but also through the stories behind them." Her guests lit up at the suggestion, their enthusiasm crackling in the air. It was an idea she had once hesitated to consider, fearing the weight of expectation and judgment. Yet here she was, inviting deeper engagement with her audience, challenging that very fear. The night unfolded as a transformative experience. The barriers Geraldine had fought against were crumbling, and she stepped into a space of recognition. A newfound self-confidence burgeoned within her. She had discovered the profound truth that her art could serve not only as a personal expression, but also as a bridge to human connection. Looking around the room, she felt immense pride flourish. This was the moment she had fought for. The moment her fears lost their grounding, morphing into something ultimately liberating. Walking back to her easel, she thought of how far she'd come. From that hesitant woman into a confident, budding artist ready to challenge the structures around her, wielding art as a tool for authenticity and connection. As her guests buzzed with enthusiasm, sparking dialogue about future collaborations and community events, Geraldine felt the lingering thread of doubt unravel completely. She had finally confronted the ghosts of her past, embracing instead the thrill of the unknown. This was her journey. An artist confident enough to share not only her work, but also her truth. It was a deserved fulfillment. She belonged to this world of creation. Each acknowledgement from her peers reaffirmed her established position as an artist who chose to embrace vulnerability over concealment. As the evening came to a close, and her guests began their farewells, an overwhelming wave of gratitude washed over her. She had not only rediscovered her love for painting, but also secured her identity in the vibrant tapestry of the artistic community. Standing alone in her studio, a smile crept upon her lips. She was ready to paint again, more fervently than ever before. The path ahead beckoned with opportunities for growth, collaboration, and the unearthing of profound truths, both on canvas and within herself. With newfound resilience, she took a deep breath, prepared to step boldly into the vibrant world of art once more. She had transformed. She had conquered self-doubt. You need to subscribe now to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that will inspire your transformation. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and show your support for authentic creativity. Comment your reactions and theories about how Geraldine's journey unfolds and resonates in your life. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this empowering conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to connect through this powerful narrative of personal achievement.